There's one last point that I would like to add. A point that I would vote for as a member of Congress that will affect every one of us here in New Hampshire. I would suggest that it's time to impose on the Iraqi government using the revenue from the oil that it sells to fund our military and the protection that we've provided to the country of Iraq as a way of getting a benefit back on the investment that we've made for them. And you know something? That's going to affect us here in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This time we're going to open it up to a few questions from the public here. So if anyone has a question, just raise your hand and bring the microphone over. We don't really need a microphone problem.
Yeah, one of the bigger debates of the past 8 years has been the balance of power between the legislative and the executive branches. Some saying that it's kind of tilted in the favor of the executive branch. If you could comment on that, and specifically, if there were another situation similar to Iraq in the future, would you only commit troops if there was a declaration of war and not only a resolution of force? Would you require an act of declaration to commit a large number of troops to a field of battle?
I'm sorry. Right, okay. First of all, I think that the balance of power is very clearly defined in the Constitution of the United States. And I think that the Constitution is a document that if we don't consider it sacred, we should. About a year and a half ago, due to this an issue that had come up on the radio show, I used to host a radio show, I went out and grabbed a copy of the Constitution. I carry it around my purse all the time now. It's with me all the time. I think that always we must defer to the Constitution, whether it's balance of power or application of power, however you perceive it. So very strongly, I think that one of the primary responsibilities of a member of Congress is to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. I think that it would be irresponsible to try to take a stand today on what future conflict we could encounter, to try to speak, especially in such a broad context. But I do feel very strongly that the declaration of war, a declaration of war, it plays a critical role in the process. And I share your concern. I know where you're coming from with that, and I share your concern about a declaration of war. I think it's an appropriate way for us to enter if we're going to enter a war, if we're going to enter a conflict, then there should be a declaration of war. But I do want to be careful not to stand here today and say, under 100% absolute circumstances, this is always the way it's going to happen, because we don't know what we're going to confront in the future. And the one thing I do know is that the conflict that we face today won't be over when we leave Iraq. It isn't just about Iraq. We have a very serious, complicated enemy in radical Islam. And we have to be careful not to try to talk about it in absolutes and in moments of time, because it is a conflict, and it is a serious threat to our nation and to quite honestly to free nations around the world that we are going to be forced to confront for a very long time to come.
At age 18, I graduated from Central High School, and as I told you, I went to West Point. My summer was about 2.5 weeks long. And I can still remember, on July 8, 1974, I raised my right hand on the plane at West Point with 1,432 classmates. And I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, and I was issued a green ID card, because I was now an active member of the armed forces of this country. In terms of my focus on the balance of power between the executive branch and the legislature, my sense is this: our president, by our Constitution, is the commander-in-chief. And although there has been much debate about the War Powers Act and whether or not the president, as commander-in-chief, can introduce our military forces, as we know from history, looking back even in the last 25 years or so, the commander-in-chief has in fact pressed the green light and deployed our military without a formal declaration of war. Now, what does Congress then have an opportunity to do? I disagree with the assessment that a balance of power has tilted in some way, because together with the judiciary, part of the beauty of this country is the checks and balances by all three branches of government. And Congress has a role if it disagrees with what the commander-in-chief, what the president has done. And quite frankly, that's a funding control. Because while the commander-in-chief can give the order to deploy the forces, sustaining the forces overseas is going to be the role of Congress in terms of voting on the budgets. And of course, we've all read about how that's gone back and forth over just this last year with a Congress that has a majority from the Democrat Party versus President Bush and his philosophy and strategy for what is in the best interest of the United States. So I don't think that, well, I can tell you that I don't believe that as a member of Congress I would have the ability, regardless of whether I agree with the President as Commander-in-Chief, to absolutely prohibit the Commander-in-Chief from employing our military forces. My vote would be a vote that would control what kind of funding follows.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. I don't concede anymore. Executive, judicial, legislative, I think they're all balancing far too much power. And I think we need to return that power back to the states and to the people themselves. So the War Powers Act, let's remember that it wasn't passed to give more power to the executive. It was passed so that Congress could avoid responsibility for decisions under Article 1 of our Constitution. They didn't want to be responsible for decisions of war and peace. Well, that's their job. And I would absolutely vote to repeal the War Powers Act. That didn't work, and there was a situation where use of force was debated in Congress. I would introduce a declaration of war so that at least we could have an honest debate, and we wouldn't see what we're seeing now, where members who voted for the declaration of force in Iraq are now trying to say, no, we didn't support the war. I think members of Congress should be on record one way or the other. As to whether I would then support the use of force, that obviously has to be up to the situations that dictate it, but I would at least fight for an honest debate over whether we go to war or not.
Thank you very much. Another question? Sir?
Good evening. Thank you all for coming to Plymouth State University. My name is Curtis Ryan. I'm the off-campus senator to our community here at Plymouth State. So I thank you for coming and welcome you. I was kind of shocked when we said that the economy was our #1 issue here in New Hampshire. I am student teaching this semester at a high school not more than 45 minutes from here. And the reason why I say I'm shocked is because education is something that we hold very near and dear to our heart, especially in New Hampshire. And I would ask what your beliefs are on No Child Left Behind, and how we can properly fund education, and how we can address the educational issue in 2 parts. That being the first, and the second relating to the economy itself, saying that as a teacher, I'm going to be a social studies teacher. For the first time probably in about 10 years, I will actually have a job opportunity awaiting me. This is due to the rising retirement age of many teachers, and seeing the largest retirement bubble of teachers in 10 years. I would ask what, on an educational campus such as our own, where education is probably the most predominant major, what we can do to recruit more teachers. Ms. Horn, I was looking at your packet and seeing that you are from Nashua. How we can avoid such things as possible teachers strike and keep these people in their jobs, off the streets, and in the classroom.